Good morning. How many of you have made it all 5 days so far? Bravo. I missed one. Once I was in Montelupo, but anyway, it's a little different when you're 65 than when you were 35. But still, it's one of my favorite times of the year, really, to something different, something special, something out of the ordinary. Lord always has things out of the ordinary for us, and it's what makes the Christian life unique and worth living. But back in the day, when we were first beginning to practice, well, we did Advent hour or Misa de Aguinaldo, whatever we called it, at the very beginning, and we just sort of followed what we could find. Followed daily office scriptures, basically. And then someone had the idea, why don't we do it according to the verses of O Come, O Come Emmanuel? Okay, great idea. This was quite a while back, quite a few years ago. And had to come up with a lectionary for it. And that was my job at that time, anything like that. And so looking, everything, just sort of came together. Lord put things together. This verse fits with this. The toughest thing to figure out was the Old Testament reading for today, Day Spring from on high, because all the other verses of O Come Emmanuel were based on the Old Testament. The wisdom from on high, the God of power and might, key of David, all those things, the root of Jesse, they were all from the Old Testament. But the Day Spring from on high is from Luke chapter 1. That's Zechariah's song that he sang to the Lord after he received the power of speech back. Once he wrote on the tablet there when everybody said, name him something else. Who the heck is John? He wrote, his name is John. And the angel of the Lord released his tongue. And one of the first things he says is, praise be to God. And part of that he said, the day spring from on high will visit us. Well, that word's just not in the Old Testament. And I pulled out the old trusty rusty Strong's Concordance and looked. And finally I said, okay, well, this part here in Joshua. Joshua says that the first day they rose up very early in the morning. That's the day spring. And then it says on the seventh day, they rose up extremely early in the morning at the very beginning of the day, the beginning of light. Well, that's day spring. That's what it is, the first light in the morning. And so Joshua 7 became, or Joshua 6, I guess, became the scripture for this fifth day of Advent hour. It's, you can look at it as a day spring, it's the new day. But I'm looking at it a little bit differently this year. Yes, it's a new day. You can look at it like that, early in the morning. And a lot of great things happened early in the morning. The resurrection itself, it says very early in the morning on the first day of the week, Jesus Christ ascended, or ascended out of the pit and rose from the grave, walked out of that tomb. But it's also Joshua, the book of Joshua, talks about a new day in Israel. Not just a new morning, not just the daylight breaking, but a new day in Israel. For 40 years, they had been under the leadership of Moses. And after 40 years of leading Israel out of Egypt, through the wilderness and to the cusp of the promised land, not yet in the promised land, but right at the edge, there's a transition. There's a change of leadership. There's a new day. And Joshua comes in. And that's really what the book of Joshua is about. And this chapter in Joshua, that's his first real test, is, the taking of Jericho. That's it. So it's a changing of the guard, the new generation stepping up. Now, Joshua was no kid at this time. He'd been through 40 years of the wilderness, and he was probably about 20 years old at the time of the Exodus, so he was at least 60. He was no child. And yet, he was the new generation, the changing of the guard. And when I look at that and think of it that way, this is very much like where we are as a church. It's a new day for us as well. not because it's about 5:30 in the morning and, the sun's coming up, but it's a changing of the guard for us. Now, this hasn't just been happening the last few weeks. This has been, several years of the process, but we're firmly in the middle of the process right now of the changing of the guard. The old generation having run its course, the new generation coming forth and taking up, the mantles of leadership and operations and facilities and, all that stuff, logistics. It's the next generation's time. Just like it was with Joshua. And like I said Monday morning, you, the next generation, which is really the current generation, you guys are survivors too. In a lot of ways, you guys are more survivors than my generation. What impresses me about you is you're survivors and you never saw the quote unquote glory days. You came along after they were pretty much done. You didn't see the massive crowds and all, you've heard stories, but you never saw it. And you still survived. Now, I caught in the very tail end of the glory days here. But back in Atlanta, the same thing happened in my church back there. There was some, amazing times. Attendance is booming and just God moving, the Spirit just doing awesome things. And the church went from like 200 people to 7,000 just in a few years. And we experienced something like that here. You've heard about it, but you've never seen it. And yet, you're still survivors. You're still the remnant. To me, that's, deserves more credibility than what, the path that the rest of us have gone through. But you, as the survivor still, you're taking the reins now. But I just want to say one thing, and this is really why I'm here this morning. There's I know this more here than here, but I know here, there's like a buzz, kind of like a vibe. Okay, we're going to step in and we're going to finish the job that the first guys couldn't handle. They couldn't finish it, they couldn't achieve the whole vision they thought they had, and now we're having to come in and do it. Let me just say, that's not true. No more than Joshua came in to finish Moses' job. Some people look at this and they say, okay, Moses didn't get the people into the promised land. He got them through the wilderness, but he didn't finish the job. God never called Moses to put them into the promised land. God called Moses to lead them to the promised land and to bring them the law and to give them an identity as people and to help them understand who they were. Moses did all of that. But he wasn't a warrior. You never saw Moses fight a single battle. The only time, one of the few times there was a battle when Moses was alive, he was sitting on a rock and people were holding up his arms. Joshua was doing the battle, and Hur and the other guys. Moses never said to the people, when we get into the promised land. Look it up. Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. He always said, when you get to the promised land. He always knew, I think, somewhere in his heart, he wasn't going to, lead the fight in there. One thing, he was 120 years old. Joshua was 60-something, but, But Moses had finished his course. He had completed his course. And it wasn't like he failed in what God called him to do. So first of all, next current generation, get it out of anybody's mind, or get it out of this generation's mind. The next generation is not here to finish what we didn't finish, or to complete and succeed at what we failed at. We had our course. We ran our race, just like Moses. Now, we still got stuff to do, but it's not at the same level it was before. It's not like our course is done. Our course is done when they put us in the ground. But, the hands-on things, active things, we're passing that on down. Been doing it and still in the process of it. But it's their course. Just like Joshua's course was his course. Joshua was the warrior. Joshua was the fighter. And he's the one that led them to capture much of the promised land. Now, Joshua also finished his course. He took over, as I said, probably around 60. He passed away at the age of 110. So about for 50 years, Joshua was leading the people in the conquest of Canaan. And when he finished, it still wasn't done. You look at the last chapter of Joshua, there's still some of the Canaanites around the land. You got some of these guys over here, some of these guys over here. So after I'm gone, you make sure you finish up. But Joshua finished his course. And that's what I'm here to encourage you, the second generation of survivors. Your course is your course. It's not Moses' course. It's not the first generation's course. It's your course. And first generation, don't expect their course to be the same as ours. They have their course just like we had ours. Just like Joshua had his, which was different than the one that Moses had. Their course is their course. What we can do is encourage them to finish it, like Joshua did. The work won't be finished. The work will never be finished until Jesus comes back. How boring it would be if everything was done and Jesus wasn't ready to come back yet. That's called a dead church. You want to make sure there's always something going on, something to be done for the Lord. The work will never be finished, but there's a course to run. And now I really understand how Psalm and the gospel fits in too. The last couple of verses of the Psalm, it talks about the reason it was chosen, because it talked about the sun also in the day spring, and the sun having its course from the east to the west, and it always makes that course every day, very faithful. Even when it's cloudy and dark and you can't see the sun still makes that course from east to west every day. The sun is faithful because it has a course from the Creator, and it runs that course. That's an encouragement also. Just like Joshua ran his. Our currently fulfilling generation, fulfilling that course. You second gens, well, I don't know what to call you. Just call you brothers and sisters. I think that's the best thing. But, when you're running your course, you run it also. And even in the gospel, it compared Jesus Christ to the lightning. When his second coming is, it'll be Christ finishing his course. He's the Alpha and Omega. His work is finished, but Christ's course is not finished until he returns again. This time of the year is the Alpha, and the second coming for Christ is the Omega. He's running his course, it says, as the lightning flashes, even from the east to the west, from one end of the sky to the other. The lightning has its course. If you've ever watched a lightning storm, it doesn't just, it like starts on one side and the light goes across the distance. So I never realized this before. Just about the same time I was thinking about the God of power and might, or now, what do we do Thursday? And it's sort of like, okay, these other, the second batch of survivors, the more impressive batch of survivors, remind them you have a course. It's your course, not my course, not Bishop Ariel's course. It's your course because you're a young guy. You guys are young guys. But, if you're my age and around, it's not our course. It's your course. Run it. Run it well. Run it like Joshua did. Know that don't let anybody ever compare you to us, because you have your course, we have ours. Run your course. Run your race. And make sure that, like Moses, like Joshua, like Christ himself, you finish that course. As Paul said, the world wasn't totally evangelized when Paul was martyred, but he was able to say, I have run my course. He did everything he needed to do. And that's my encouragement to you. You've been impressive so far. Keep it up. You have your course. You have something from the Lord. Most precious thing you can have is a course, a plan, a calling from the Lord. Keep running. Keep doing it. But do it according to what the Lord shows you. Because the baton's in your hands now. You listen to the Lord, and you know what he wants you to do. Amen?